Hey everybody, and welcome back to How to Build a Blog with Laravel. We're moving on to part number 35 of our series. We've done so much so far. Thanks so much for making it this far in the series. And in this video, we're gonna tie in everything we learned in the last video about many-to-many relationships, and we're gonna start working on our tagging, the tagging system inside of our application, okay? So we're gonna go through, we're gonna create a model, we're gonna make a migration to store our tags, and we're gonna make our intermediary table, and then we're gonna do some basic CRUD to make the tags so we can create the tags and stuff like that. And then we're going to tie it all together and actually have tags available in our application. So that's what we have coming up. Let's get started. All right, so for those of you guys that are just barely joining in and maybe missed the last video, I do highly recommend you go back and watch the previous video. It's part 34 of this series. I have a link for it below or inside the description if you're on mobile. And the reason I want you to watch or understand that video is that it talks about what many-to-many relationships are and how they work, okay? And our tags are, they're highly dependent on the fact that you understand how a many-to-many relationship works, okay, inside of our database. Okay, so if you do not understand that, please go back and watch that video. If you're just joining in for the first time and you enjoy this series, you can always, at the end of the video or in the description, you can find links at any time to go back and watch the whole series. We're learning a ton of information and really having some fun with Laravel. Okay, so let's get started on working on our tags and tying the tag application into our, or tying the tag system into our application. Okay, so I'm gonna head on over to, oh, I'm already in my blog, that's convenient. And let's see, the first thing we need to do with our application is we're gonna need to generate a model and a migration, okay? So let's take a look at real quick how to do that. I've just opened up our project here and okay, now to start off the video today, the first thing we're gonna be doing is working on creating the model for our project, and then we're gonna create a migration to set up our tags table, okay? So that'll actually store our tags. After we get done with that, we're gonna move on and then make the pivot table or the intermediary table. They have several different names depending on what school of thought you come from, but we're gonna work on that intermediary table that we talked about where we have the tag ID and the post ID in the same table and get them to link together, okay? So that's gonna be the focus of finishing up this video where we are right now. Now we already have the post model and we're aware of that. If we come over here into app, you can see we have our post model. We already have a category function set up, and we have it set up for categories because it can have one category. So this is our model here. What we're going to eventually be doing here is extending this and adding another relationship in here. So what we'll be doing here is going public function and then tags, right? We're going to create a function to work with our tags so we can access our tags inside from our posts. So this is the post model. We have tags associated with the post, and so we're adding it here so we can then, we're basically linking the two models together. Now we haven't created this model yet, but if you remember from the last video, what we're gonna end up doing is we're going to say belongs to many, and then we'll do app/tag. Okay, and then this will associate with a tag model, which doesn't currently exist. The only models we have are category, post, and user, okay? So we need to go ahead and create that last tag so that this can work, and then we need to create the inverse inside of that new model. We need to create the inverse so that the tags point to the posts and have belong to many posts, okay? So we'll point back to this here. So remember that when you're working with relationships, you need to have both sides of the relationship set up, okay? So the post, in this case, we're working on the post, it has many tags, so we're saying that it belongs to many tags. But then we need to go over to the tags later after we get that set up and then say it has many posts, all right? So I want to kind of show you guys what we're doing with that. Okay, now that we've got that set up, we need to go ahead and create this model. And with it, we're going to create a migration. Now you guys should remember that their migrations are what help you set up your databases so you can generate your database tables. And that's what we're going to be doing with our tag model, okay? So we have our tag model. The model just allows you to work with the database. That's all the model does. And then the migrations are actually what generate the database. I got a good email the other day from somebody that asked, he was working on a database that already existed, and he was creating a Laravel app that tied into that database. And he said he was wondering what he did with the migrations if he tries to recreate the database table with the migrations. And you don't actually need migrations in that case. And the reason for that is because the migrations just help you generate and roll back database tables. If you already are working with a live database that's already been created for you, you can just, you don't have to do the migrations because you already have the database created, okay? You're not gonna be rolling it back or anything like that. Now, if you were adding something to that database, then you would probably add a migration for the part that you're adding, but you don't need to do anything. If there's already access if the database is already created, you can just create a model which can talk to the database. The model will talk to the database. It knows all the column names and everything by just looking at the database and based on the table that you assign to it, okay? It looks at that table and it knows what's available to it, okay? And you get all the handy functions that we're used to in models, like being able to create the queries, the query generator, all that kind of stuff, these relationships. You can set those up in the model, and then the database is actually kind of its own separate thing, and the migration is what just helps you kind of generate that database table. But if you already have the database table, you don't need it, okay? I just thought I'd bring that up because that was a question that I think a few people were confused on, and just wanted to kind of address it. In this video, we're always creating a model and a migration together because the model talks to the database, but then we don't have the database table created yet. So we're generating a database table, so then we make the migration to generate the database table. So it seems when you're watching this video like you always need the migration, and you don't always need the migration. If you're working with an existing database, you do not need the migration because the database has already been created outside of the application, and you're not trying to monitor it or anything like that. Now, there are a few different things that if you're doing an open source project, you might still do a migration anyway, which it gets into some more complicated stuff that I don't want to talk about necessarily. But for the most part, the migrations are only needed if you're generating the database or modifying the database as you're working on the project. And the migrations are just a way for Laravel itself to work with your database. But you could go your whole project without working on migrations, and you could just build it yourself. That's what I used to do before Laravel. The frameworks I was using, and I used to not even use a framework at all, they didn't have the migrations functionality, and so we used to just have to go create them ourselves, and we would actually just write the SQL code or use a GUI or something to generate the database structure ourselves, and then we just tied our application into it, and we didn't have the migrations, the convenience of migrations to roll things back or anything like that. So it was definitely, migrations are definitely the way to go, but they're not necessary, okay? But the model is necessary. The model is what talks to the database and brings the database information into your Laravel application, all right? So with that being said, I just wanted to point that out because a few people were confused, and this project, we're always doing them together, migrations and models, but that doesn't mean that you always need to. But for the most part, if you're creating an application from scratch, you're gonna be doing it. Okay, so let's go over here. We're gonna use the PHP artisan command, and we're going to generate a new model. So we're gonna do PHP artisan make model. So you guys remember this, and then we're gonna give it the name of the model. Remember to do a capital letter and then the singular version of the name, okay? So in this case, this is gonna monitor all of our tags. So we do a capital T at the beginning and we call it just tag because you're gonna pull one item usually out of the database tag. So anyway, PHP artisan make model tag, and then you could click enter, that'll generate the application, or what we're gonna do is we're actually going to add a migration on here as well. So what we can do here is you can do double hyphen, okay, dash, and we'll add migration. And this will just generate a migration, with everything that we're working on. So that should be good. Let's go ahead and just click enter. You can see it created the model and then it created the migration. And it says here, create tags table, already got it named. So let's go take a look at it. you can see that we have a new project down here, a new file here called tags, or tag. Okay, so this is our new model. We now have access to anything that was in the database. We haven't created the table yet because we haven't actually ran the migration, but the migration's been created. So you can see that we just have the basic eloquent stuff here. We haven't added anything into here yet, but we could go ahead and just add our function for our posts. Okay, so we could do public function posts, and then we'll just do return this belongs to many, and we'll say app / post, just like that. Okay, perfect. Now, we talked about in the last video, if you need other parameters, there's some optional parameters here. We could do the name of the table, and then the other parameter is the name for the column that represents the tag, the project we're in. So in that case, it would be tag ID will be what we call it, but we haven't created it yet. But that's the default that it's looking for. So if we create a column called tag ID and we follow that convention, we don't really need this. We can just leave it blank. This is what it's expecting. But if you ended up generating something, you know, you had a column called tags or just anything, you could reference it here and you could just kind of overwrite the convention. Okay, but by default, what it's going to be looking for is the name of your model. So in this case, tag, and then it looks for _ID, and it's looking for a column in the intermediary table called tag ID, and it's assuming that that represents the tag that we're in this model. It represents this model. And then the second parameter we can give it is for the foreign key. So in this case, the post. By default, it's going to look for the name of that model, which is post. So it's going to look for post _ID. That's what it's going to be looking for. You could override that if you wanted. But we're going to leave it blank because we're actually just going to follow the conventions. So it's going to all be exactly what it expects. So we don't need to tell it to override anything. Now for the name of the table, the way we generate the name of the table by default in Laravel, and of course you can override it here. You could have tag, intermediate table could be the name of your table. Intermediate table. That could be the name of your table if you want, and then you would just override it here. However, Laravel expects a convention that we usually follow, and if you follow the convention, then you don't need to specify it. The convention Laravel expects is that you take the name of this model and then the name of the other model, so in this case tag and post, and then you put them in alphabetical order separated by a underscore. So we have tag, we have post. In this case, post comes before, the P in post comes before T in the alphabet. Okay, so we would do post tag is what you would do here. Okay, so it would be post tag would be the name of the table that it's expecting, okay, is post tag. And that's just, again, we take the name of this model, the name of the other model, and then we just put them in alphabetical order, and then it will be called, so the P comes first. So you have post tag, that's the name of the table. But again, we're going to just follow that convention, so we don't need to specify because it's already going to assume that by default. All right, so that completes our tag model. Our tag model is ready to go. Now let's go ahead and work on our migrations. So let's head on over to database and then migrations. Down here at the bottom, we should have our latest migration. You can see it says create tags table. And remember, this is not the intermediary table. This is the table that's going to store the tags, okay? We have our tag for our posts. We need to create our tag, we have our table for our posts, and then we've got our table for our tags. And then we need a middle table, the pivot table, the intermediary table that links them together, okay? We're not creating that pivot table. We'll do that soon. We already have the post table. What we're working on now is the tag table, okay? So you got to remember there's 3 tables needed here. We already have the post table. We're already using it for our blog posts. And now we're creating a table that's going to store all of our tags, okay? So what do we need for our tags? Well, we need the name of the tag, obviously. And we're going to have our created and updated at. You could probably get into some more advanced stuff if you wanted to have sub tags and stuff like that. But that's really all I can think of that we're going to have. So we're just going to mess with just the name, and that's really all we need. So an ID number, the name, and then the timestamps. And that'll be basically it. Kind of similar to the categories. In fact, as a side note, for those of you guys that have ever wondered how something like WordPress, the big blogging system, powers 30% of the web, how WordPress handles tags and categories in its database, what it does is it creates a database table called taxonomies. And taxonomies basically refers to any type of tag, category, any of that stuff. And the way it sets it up is it gives everything a name and then a type number. So each type represents, like a number 1 represents a category, a number 2 represents a tag, a number 3 represents, I'm trying to think what other, they have other taxonomies that I can't remember. But anyway, they have other stuff like that. So they just keep adding the different things there, and they store them all in one table. So their categories and their tags are actually stored in the same table. And when they're looking for categories, they just grab everything out of that table with a number 1 in the type, in the taxonomy type. And they know that those are categories. When they want to grab tags, they just grab everything out that has like a number 2. And then they know those are all tags, right? And so they can, that's a really good, powerful way to do that. Might be even a little more efficient than what we're doing here, but for simplicity, we're just going to keep them all separate, okay? But just keep that in mind as you're starting to build your own applications. Think about how you might, that might be a more efficient way for you to manage, things like that. So every project has its own unique circumstances, and there is no right or wrong way to do it. One of the things I love about programming that a lot of people, I see a lot of stuff on Stack Overflow, or people will email me through this series, and they'll say, hey, I did it this way. Is this right? And my question is, I don't know. Does it work? If it works, then it's right. You know what I mean? Like, there is no right or wrong way to do it. I show you ways that are my preferences. You're going to go out on the internet and you might find the same way to do something that I showed you a completely different way. And why did I show you it my way and not the other way? Well, because I prefer the way that I showed you. I think it's more efficient for whatever reason it's going to be. I have different reasons for, all the various things. It might be more efficient. It might be, less server intensive. It might just be easier to do. There's just different reasons. And you're going to, as you grow and develop, you're going to become better at learning all the different ways to do something. You choose your best way or your favorite way, and that becomes the best way, right? There is no right or wrong way to do something in a lot of cases. We have what we call conventions in programming. There's kind of like good best practices, or is what we call them. And for example, the table naming convention here is a best practice. So having the name of the two models together in alphabetical order, that's a best practice. If you got another programmer, you hire another programmer down the road, or you leave your current company and they bring someone in, the current programmer should know those conventions, understand exactly what happened. Instead of me coming up with my own random way to do it, you coming up with your own random way to do it, we have some conventions that are good to follow. And you should know if you're straying from a very fundamental convention. MBC, for example, is a very fundamental convention. You really shouldn't stray from that. But when it comes to these other things, you have more flexibility. There is no right or wrong way to do it. Find a way that makes it work, but always be open to looking at how other people do it, because there are ways to improve what you do. We call it refactoring. You may rewrite your code. We call that refactoring your code. And that means that you basically write it to be better. And you can sometimes take what you thought was a good block of code. I've done this before. I think I wrote the best block of code in the world. And then I go through a month later and I figure out that I could take 10 lines of code and cut it into 3 lines of code or something like that. So that stuff happens. Don't be ashamed. And just know that when you ask if there's a right way to do it, what I would rather hear is, don't hear me if that's the right way to do it, because if it works, then it must be, it works. It's right. You might be able to ask, is there a better way? Is there a more improved way to do it? Is there a more conventional way to do it? Those are the kinds of things you might want to be thinking about, whether it's just the best way to do it. There's more than one way to do everything in programming. So just always remember that there's always more than one way to do it. So anyway. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to create our tag application. I used to try to avoid these. I used to try to avoid these kind of side notes that come up while I'm thinking about stuff, these tangents. And because I used to kind of think it would drive you guys crazy with me going off on these wild tangents and talking about these things. But the reason I'm actually going to kind of go back and allow myself to go on these tangents again is because you may have noticed I stopped doing that last few videos. The last probably 10 videos, I've been more conscious about sticking hard to the stuff and not going on the tangents. But then I started reading lots of comments, and a lot of you guys really enjoy the information that I provide in those. And I also didn't realize that a lot of you guys aren't as familiar with programming as I originally expected when I started this course. And so that's why I'm going to start adding a little more of the tangents in there, because apparently it is very useful. I get lots of compliments about it, people that appreciate it. And so I'm going to start, bringing those back a little bit more as things come up, as I think about them, obviously. But I also didn't realize that a lot of you guys are really, really new to the programming world. And I didn't, when I first set out in this course, I didn't expect that. So first of all, I got to say, if you're just like, I read a comment the other day of someone that this is like the first thing they've ever written. You guys, if this is the first thing you've ever written, give yourself a pat on the back, because this is not easy. We are going through a lot of stuff, and I know I'm trying to explain it the best way possible, and I'm glad that that's helping. But I mean, despite all of that, this is a big project to do for your first project. I mean, my first projects were static websites, and granted that was in 1998 or something, but like my first projects were static websites, and it took me years and years and years to build up from static websites to more dynamic websites to things that just had a little bit of motion, just stuff like that. And granted, the world's changed a lot, and there's a lot more tools at your disposal now than there was back in 98 when I started, 99. But I mean, back then we didn't even, PHP, I don't even know, PHP existed, I think, but there weren't the resources you have today. So, I mean, it was a very different world, but you're still, it's incredible if you guys are building this, and this is your first application that you've built, or even your second or third. This is impressive, guys. Give yourself a pat on the back. Be really proud for what you've done, because this is not something, a lot of people will go years of learning before they get to this level. Okay, so just feel good with what you do, because at the end of this course, even what you know now, you should be able to start building some pretty basic stuff. Without getting into advanced animations and advanced, we haven't talked about APIs, and we won't in this series, but the next series will be about APIs, which are really important. We haven't done any advanced APIs or AJAX or anything like that, which is popular for modern web development. But you can create almost any. You want to create a to-do list? You want to create the next app? You can do that with the knowledge that you've got here. So give yourself a pat on the back if you like that. All right. Okay, tangents are over. Let's get back to the application. So we're working on creating our tags application. What we're gonna do is, you can see it's already created a table called tags, which is perfect. That's what we want to call it. It's already created a column for our primary ID. That's great. That's what we want. It's already created the columns for our timestamps. That's great. The only thing we really need to do is the name. Okay, so the name of our tags. So what we're gonna do here is go table, and then string, and then we're going to call it name. And that's it. Okay, we're going to leave it. It's by default, it's required. Remember that. It's required. We want it to be required, so that works. Yeah, everything's good. That's all we really needed to set up. Here at the with our down function, you can see we just drop the table. We just delete the whole table. That works. We don't have to go through and undo all these, because since we created the table, we just delete it if we roll back. That's what the down function is in case you roll back your migrations, then you can get back to where you were before. All right. Since this migration creates a table, then when we undo the migration, we just want to delete the table. You're basically just doing the reverse. All right. That's everything there. We're done. I'm going to go ahead and save that, and we're going to go and run the migration. So we're going to do PHP. We're back in our terminal. PHP artisan migrate. It migrated the create tags table. That's perfect. And let's just go ahead and take a look at it in the GUI interface. GUI stands for graphical user interface, for those of you guys that are wondering. We're going to look at it here under blog, and you can see we now have a new table called tags. Okay, we've got our ID number, our name, our created at, and our updated at. You can kind of see here, ID, name, created at, updated at. This is a varchar for our name, so it's a max length of 255. We're going to want to remember that when we go to validate, and everything else is pretty standard, just timestamps and the ID number. Okay, Down here, it shows you that you have an index. Okay, so we've got our tag table set up. Now the last thing we need to do is create that pivot table, the intermediary table, and we're going to call that post tag, all right? So just like we talked about before, we take the two model names, put them in alphabetical order. So we've got our posts, we've got our tags, and then we're going to have one called post tag. And we're going to have that. Now that one, let's go ahead and just create that migration. So we're going to come over here to our terminal, do PHP artisan make migration, and then we're going to call the migration create post tag table. All right, now if you wanted, you could do this thing with fields. The fields let you kind of like when it generates it, it'll automatically generate the fields. I don't think I've showed you guys this yet. So let me go ahead and, well, we'll do it on another one because this gets kind of complicated. I don't actually know how to do it with foreign keys. We'll do it later. Okay. I'll find an excuse to do it later. Okay, so we're just going to do this. We're going to do PHP artisan make. This, remember that this always is how you generate everything in Laravel. PHP just tells the terminal to use PHP. Artisan means to use the artisan commands. There's a bunch of commands collectively called artisan. They're in a program called artisan. That's bundled with Laravel. So these are basically the Laravel commands. The Laravel command line is called artisan. Okay, that's where artisan comes in. So we're saying use PHP, run the artisan commands, and then the artisan command we want to run is called make. The sub command we want to run is the migration make command, and then the space, and then everything after that are just your parameters. So in this case, it wants the name of the migration, how to name the migration. We're going to call it create post tag table, and that's it. We're going to click enter. It's going to create that migration. You can see it puts a timestamp, and then it gives it the name create post tag table. That way I know what it is when I look at it. And then you can see that we now have a new migration down here below. When we click that, it says create post tag table. We have a public function up and a public function down, okay? So we can follow a really similar format to what we have here. So let's go and just copy this real quick for the up function and just paste it in here, just like that. Okay, so what we're doing here is we've done our schema. You guys should remember this before. I'll have a link just down in the description if you want to look up the Laravel documentation for the schema. But we're just going to follow the schema create. We're going to have the name of the table here, which is going to be called post tag. That's the name of the table. And then we're going to generate, it says an ID field. That's normal. Then we're going to have a integer field. And the integer field will be called post ID. All right, so that's going to be the foreign key ID number for, and we don't need timestamps, so let's get rid of timestamps. That's going to be the foreign key ID number for the post. Okay, so that's going to link to the post ID so we know what post to reference, okay? And then the last thing I want to do here is we're going to give it another command here called unsigned. I've talked about this before, but unsigned basically just doubles the amount of memory that we can put towards the integer because we know we're never going to have a negative primary ID. Never. Unsigned means not to have negative numbers. So it only counts upward and not downward. And that just doubles the amount of memory that you can have. An integer is allotted a certain amount of memory. I think it's like 1K, 10K, something like that. I'm not a database administrator, so I'm not, you know, I don't know a ton about that, but it's allotted like 10K of space, I think. And when it knows it's got to go all the way down to like negative 1,000 or something, and then it can go up to a positive 1,000, that means you can only go up to positive 1,000. Well, if you know you're never going to go down to negatives, you can say, hey, do unsigned. And unsigned means basically just count from 0 upward. And that means you can go from 0 now to say 2,000 instead of just 1,000. Now it's not 2,000. It's actually, it counts out 10 digits, which is in the billions, I think. So you guys can count that out. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's what it counts out to. So that's... So yeah, that's 1 billion. And then by doubling that, you now have to go out 20 digits, basically. All right, perfect. Let's see, post ID unsigned. And then now the other one we want to do is called integer. and then tag ID. Okay, this is going to reference the tag, and this is going to finish it up. And then we're going to add the unsigned because the same thing qualifies. It's linking to a primary ID. We can just have the unsigned. Now we're going to add one other thing down here. And you can add these both at the end. It doesn't matter the order they're in, but I just like to kind of link them together. We're actually going to tell the table to that this is a foreign key. Okay, so what that means, and this is kind of optional. It depends on the encoding of your database. If you add it in there, then you know you're going to always be able to take advantage of it if your database can. But chances are, if you're using MySQL and you're using the ISAM encoding, then you can't take advantage of it anyway. But I'm going to show you guys what it is. You can actually manually hard code in your database that this is a foreign key. And the way you do that is, if you're assuming your database supports it, you can do it, is what I'm saying. But the good thing about Laravel is that if your database doesn't support it and you have it in there anyway, you're safe because it just doesn't do it. Your database doesn't support it, it doesn't do it. And if it does support it, then you get to take advantage of it. So I just want to show you guys how it works. So if you want to manually tell it that this is a foreign key field, then you can just do this. You can say, hey, foreign key, and then you give it the name of the field, post ID. So we're saying, hey, the post ID column is a foreign, holds a foreign key. And then you can say, then you tell it what it references. So we're going to say references the ID field in, we actually use the on command though, but on, and then the name of the table where that ID can be found, okay? So what we're telling it here is post ID is simply a representation. It links directly to the ID field in the posts table, okay? So in our post table, we have an ID column on the side. That number corresponds with what's being stored inside of here, okay? And that'll actually get hard-coded into your database that it links to there. Okay, so I just want to show you guys how you can do that. This is a good idea to have whenever you do foreign keys. I thought about doing it in the last video, and then I didn't want to, I just thought it was maybe too much. Foreign, we're doing the same thing here. So now we're doing the tag ID. We're going to say that tag ID is a foreign key and that it references the ID column in the tag field. All right, so we do on tags. All right, remember that these are just the name of the table, not the name of the model, but the name of the table in the database. Okay, that's basically everything. If you wanted to add timestamps, you could add timestamps. I'm not going to worry about timestamps. So that's all we've got. So we've got our ID number, our ID field, we've got a post ID, we've got a tag ID, and then we just tell it that these post ID references the ID number in posts, and then the tag ID references the ID in tags. That's everything we need. Down here, all we need to do is we can do a schema drop and then tell it to drop the post tag table. Okay, let's go ahead and save that. We're going to close this and then run the migration. So PHP artisan migrate. This should run our migration. It migrated it. And let's now open up our database and take a look at it. So if we come over here, let me just refresh the database. We have our new post tag field. We have our ID column, our post ID, and our tag ID. Okay, and then you can see down here in our indexes, we have our primary ID is always indexed. That's normal. And then you can see here that we have an index because it's a foreign key. You can it tells you everything right down here. Now I don't actually have relations. I don't believe. Oh, it does have relations. Interesting. I didn't know this supported it. So that's interesting. I learn something new every day. So, but our relations are set up. So you can see here that the post ID column references the foreign key. That's what FK is. The foreign key, it belongs to post, and then the ID column, that's the foreign key column that it represents, is over here. There's also, we didn't talk about this yet. I almost got to it when we did tag categories, but you can also, when you set up your foreign keys, you can tell it that when you say update this column, you can, or if you delete a row that references this, you can do something, or if you update it. So that's what these on delete and on updates are. Those are also available to you as a database, but we're not going to get into those right now. Okay, so anyway, that's what we set up. We've got everything all kind of set up. So I'm going to go ahead finished the video off here. We set up all the relations that we need. So now all we really have to do is the CRUD. Okay, so if we just get the CRUD finished up so you can create the tags and everything like that, everything's already set up to work. So now you're just worrying about creating the tags and then doing what we did a few videos ago with the categories, where we need to create an interface that allows us, when we're making a blog post, that we can link tags while creating the blog post. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing in the next video, is working on those two things. But we have all the heavy lifting for setting up a many-to-many relationship done here in this project. Okay, so the main thing to remember is that you've got this belongs to many for your, this is the post model. So we reference our tags, and then in our tags we reference our posts. Okay, and then we've got our database all set up so they can talk to each other. All right, so now it's just time to save these things into the database and work on the CRUD so that we can actually take advantage of them. All right, that's gonna wrap up this video today. It is Memorial Day here in the United States where I am, and so that's why I'm not wearing I'm wearing a little bit nicer clothing because I'm getting ready to go visit family. So I'm gonna go do that. Hopefully this video will be up. I know it's a holiday, so a lot of you guys might just be sitting around bored, and maybe this video can be helpful for you. So I'll get this video up before I head out, but that's where I will be today. If you guys want to follow me along, hit me up on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at _JACurtis, JACURTIS. I kind of talk about the videos on there, give you guys updates on the videos. If you follow me with all the updates, you can see I talk to other people about kind of how to help them on the videos. So there's always that, and then you can kind of get a little glimpse into my personal life. I talk about what's happening in my life, kind of some pictures and videos of that as well. So if you want to really follow me a little bit more, you can follow me on Twitter. That's where I hang out the most. I do not have a Facebook, so that's why I don't really have anything else. I really just kind of use Twitter. So that's my social network of choice, for me at least. All right, thanks for everything, guys. I will see you guys probably tomorrow. So I will make another video tomorrow, and I'll see you guys then. Peace.